John Meuret from Meuret Grain Company is our marketing analyst this week. As of the latest USDA crop progress report, the nation's farmers were nearly 3/4 finished with corn planting and a third of the way complete sowing their soybeans. Nebraska is wrapping up its corn planting with less than 10% to go. The state had also put 65% of its soybeans in the ground as of Sunday. It was a turbulent ride in the soybean market this week, with prices moving higher Monday, starting the same way Tuesday before dropping lower, then surging back above $15 a bushel on the nearby futures contract Wednesday and continuing those gains Thursday. We started by looking at that movement when we talked with John Thursday afternoon.
You know, I think unease, Jeff. Nobody knows exactly how many beans are left in the country or how many we've imported or have planned to import. On top of that, we don't have all the beans planted this spring. So real unease. I think people are just, it's a big question mark. And so the path of least resistance today is higher.
In your area of Antelope County in northeast Nebraska, what's planting progress?
Really, really good. We're 99% done with corn, probably 85% done with soybeans. A little bit of replanting this week, Jeff. Some of the early guys maybe got nipped back with some frost here late last week. So a few beans going back in, the corn should be okay.
In that prospective plantings report at the end of March, we saw that the USDA was expecting about 81.5 million acres of soybeans. Now at the end of June, we'll get another estimate. Do you think that number will be much higher in soybeans?
I think they're a little higher. The total between the two is higher. We talked about that the last time I was on. I still think that's the case. You've got some prevent plant acres that are going to come back in. Yeah. I would guess you're going to see beans maybe 1 million, 1.5 million higher. Corn probably still somewhere around 500,000 to 1 million acres higher. So yeah, I do. I expect both acreage figures to be higher, and I expect some prevent plant to come back into play.
Now, will that weigh on the market heavily?
I think it's going to be a factor today. Corn for the last 3 weeks here, 2 weeks, has been beat up. I think that is weather. That's summer weather more than it is the acreage question here. So, but yeah, it will have a negative impact.
You mentioned beans coming into the country, maybe from Brazil or Argentina. How many beans are coming in?
You know, we've seen estimates from 70 to 90 million bushel, and so a lot. Yeah. But the problem is they're not landed here yet. The second problem is, of course, with some biodiesel rules, some of the beans can't come in and go to the crush plants. And there's only a couple of them that can make them work really easily and still sell the biodiesel. So I would expect that we're going to have some problems going forward. The system's not set up to bring beans in. It's set up to ship beans out. As you know, livestock's extremely profitable. So whatever the price of soybean meal this summer, the end user is going to pay it here. So beans and soybean meal really, to me, are going to have a hard time finding the top here for a little bit.
Right. If that's the case, if it's hard to bring it in and maybe there aren't as many beans as the USDA, I think you're kind of thinking that there's more beans than the USDA believes there is. But if the USDA is correct, then would that mean that we might ration some demand here?
I think we're going to have to ration demand and or a combination of the imports. And
right.
The problem with rationing demand is just like we just said, which is that it's extremely profitable to feed any livestock today. So at what point does that guy stop? Boy, it's going to take a pretty high figure. So we'll get through it. And to your point, I think there are probably a few more beans around than there was a year ago. Certainly is going to be tight, don't get me wrong, but yeah, I certainly think we've got a couple wild months coming up ahead of us.
Let's talk new crop soybeans, because if you're an old crop, you probably have a number in your head that you're waiting for, and what you say, John, might not do anything about that.
The new crop's really negative, but yeah. I really think it's like the corn market a year ago. You had very, very tight old crop stocks, and yet we knew that we were going to grow enough acres for new crop. This year's the same thing. We know we have plenty of beans going to be planted. But we have to resolve the old crop situation first. And I think until we do that, we're going to hang around here. And beans are going to go to $13 new crop. And I still think an $8 or $9 new crop figure's not impossible.
You still got those bear paws out then?
I do, Jeff. I do.
All right, let's move to corn. It has slid. What would cause it to go back up, or have we reached a peak maybe?
I don't know that we've reached the peak necessarily, but what we've done is find demand. I think everybody jumped on the corn bull bandwagon early, pushed it up, kind of pushed the end user to the sidelines. And on this break, the end user stepped back in. He's been an aggressive buyer really on the whole break. And so that's a very healthy market in my mind. I think we've got this planting acreage figure coming out. We're going to have a little bit of weather probably going forward. I certainly think it's not impossible to see a bounce. And where does the top of the bounce go? It depends on the kind of severity of the weather.
Now, would you wait for that if you were a seller, or would you try to sell in increments?
I'd probably wait for it as a seller. I think you've got to wait. You've got a little time. And same thing, relating it back to the soybeans here, until we take the old crop bean situation off the table, you're going to keep new crop beans elevated, and I think that keeps new corn elevated.
Yeah, what about basis numbers in your area?
They're getting better. We've seen transportation improve markedly here from April into May. It's a little scary June forward. We know there's a lot of corn yet to move in the Northwest Corn Belt, and the railroad's performing slowly better here.